who I am, really. I'm a child of Christ, so I'm a woman of faith first and foremost, and that helps inform a lot of my art and my approach to art. Um, I'm a wife, and I'm a stepmom, and I'm an aunt, and I have family. So for the most part, what brought us here is to continue to get further away from the snow. And we kept moving until it stopped snowing. And then we decided, that Beaufort was really a beautiful place, so we stayed here. Personally and professionally, I've been a project manager for construction and design, mostly for the military, for about 25 years. So I've worked for all the services and mostly working and designing for medical facilities, dental facilities, things that make the military's life better, and for those people who really, you know, save us. So it was important for me to do that. And I really never had a better work career than I did with that. And other things that I count really important as a professional achievement was the work I did to make those facilities for the Air Force and the Navy when I was in Maryland, before I got further south to get away from the snow. And then personally, it's just been important for me to make art that has a story and that it has beauty and it speaks to people, because if you don't touch somebody else's heart, then why are you here? So that's really kind of my personal work so far, has been in that direction. So I didn't so much discover art as I remember from like as young as I've ever been. I was the kid playing with the little diorama, stories in shoeboxes. And my sister was very much an outdoor person, and my brother was very sporty, but my mom was an artist. And she did that in between her career also. So for me, that was very inspirational. And she had a lot of different mediums she worked in, between oil and watercolor and ceramics, that I got inspired by that. So as I got older, I started working and taking school at Parsons School of Design in New York, where I was interested in fashion design. And that was the first time I ever took a life's drawing, like a live model. And that's where they taught you how to sharpen your pencil and how to draw. And I was smitten by that introduction to art of the figure and of people. I wasn't really any good at fashion design because I knew how to sew, but I didn't really know how to illustrate. And that's really what was important in fashion design. And so years later, I took classes at my local college, and that teacher for me was the kind of mentor that I hope to be for people, is that she was generous. It was a college course. I took it for years, all of the classes that she had, and she was very encouraging, and she just introduced me to all different kinds of implements to draw with and ways to draw and things to see. And that's what I think a teacher is that they teach you to see. And they teach you and give you the confidence that you can do this. You think you can't when you get older. People think, I can't draw. Well, if you can pick up a pencil and you can sign your name, you can learn to draw. And so that was the beginning of really all my education. And I'm still working at that time. So after that, I went to the Schuler School in Baltimore, which has absolutely no relation to me, just happens to be my name. And they teach a 4-year college that is like an atelier, which just is French for workshop. And they teach you everything from charcoal to oil, how that process works, all of the old master formulas and so forth. So that's my introduction, that's my education. And then I just really began practicing. And as I practiced, I learned how to teach people, because I was always teaching people something in my life. I used to work with horses, and I used to teach people to ride. And then I was at work, and you would teach people how to work with computers or IT things. And then when I'm doing this, I just really believe in teaching art to people who feel like they can't do it. So that's kind of my journey in art so far. And so for that, it's so fulfilling, really, to be able to express yourself in a way that you can look at and go, I really like that, and it says who I am. And other people want to see your art because I really believe in the story behind the image. And so there's not a thing that I make that I don't sell. When somebody buys it, they always want the story with it. Well, the story is why I made it. The story is what it's about. So if you don't give people the story, they have no reason to know why your art, is there. So my inspiration for the most part is a lot of what I had said earlier. It's just, I don't get angsty art. I just feel like I want beauty for myself. I want to display beauty. And as a dancer, that's part of my inspiration, is because I used to be a dancer in New York City. So I understand where the muscles are that make you able to do some of the moves that they are captured with in still life. And I also love movement. So movement, whether it's in the horses or it's in the dancers or it's in other pieces, it's just got a flow to it where you feel like you're capturing kind of a moment in time. So that really inspires me. I use my own photography. I use things that I can borrow from other photographers that lend it to you. So most of the time, there's people and groups that you can ask, can I use that for a reference? And so then you have permission to do that. Where all of the other work comes from is usually any source I can find it where I have permission to use it. Now, cemeteries are just awesome, particularly in Europe, because that's where a lot of these pieces came from. There was a fabulous photographer in Stuttgart that gave me the photography rights to use that work and for some pieces, because they just don't make stuff like that anymore. So a little bit about some of the work that's in this room is, I'll speak a little bit to it. This is a charcoal piece, first and foremost. The inspiration for this was a photograph that I found from a photographer in Stuttgart, Germany, where this is the Pragerhof Cemetery. And in this cemetery is this massive stone carved angel, probably over 7 feet tall, in front of a mausoleum for a family. And that family, this angel just struck me so much that I asked for permission to use it as my reference piece. And they agreed. And so what I like about it, and what I discovered while I did some research, which always informs my drawing, is I like a story about the piece. This is called Watcher of the Flame. And it's angels that are found in the cemetery in general are images and icons of spirituality. And so they guard the tomb. They're thought to be messengers between God and man. And a lit torch, which is what really intrigued me, this lit torch, always represents immortality and everlasting life. But when the torch is downturned and still flaming, it means gone from here and present above. And that's what I liked about this particular image. So this is that piece, carved in place and in Stuttgart. It actually belongs to the Knopf family. And the Knopf family in German means Kessler, and Kessler is my maiden name. So I went, well, that's a piece I got to do. So the great photography folks that have been super kind, they just use their work and they lend it to artists. A lot of the horses that I have are from a fabulous French photographer, and she just photographs everything and puts it out there for artists to use and to recreate and then repost. So it's just a very sharing community. And like I said, the cemeteries in Europe are just, I don't know that I'd come back. I'd have so many pictures and so much work to just do from that. And what I love about that is it's inspirational. It's usually because somebody has passed away, and so there's sorrow involved and there's grief involved, and these are things that we live with all the time as a people. And so to speak to people who are in pain through art or through imagery just helps them realize, well, you're not alone. This is in the world, and that there's a way for you to be held by others who've been through it. And I think that's all the things that connect for me as an artist, is in that way that I start. start my journey. It's a slow journey because pencil is by nature very much a light to dark process. So there's pencil grades, and people don't always know that it's not just the pencil you went to school with. It is a pencil that's a very light and hard one that goes all the way to a very dark one. And that's the way that I was trained. And the old masters used to use silver point, which is really just unforgiving. There's no erasing. You just have to use a metal point. So pencil is the modern version of the Renaissance's silver point. And so those take anywhere based on a size from months to up to a year, depending on how many pieces I'm working on. Charcoal is a lot faster, and that's another favorite medium of mine, and not everybody can tell the difference, but like that one behind me is both of those. One is charcoal on the bottom and the one on the top is pencil. And I know we'll look at some of those, but the physical process is to get the idea and the design, and then you get the composition from the photographer who offered you the work to say what part of this image is going to be used as my reference. So that is very helpful to be able to manipulate in Photoshop, add backgrounds and so forth, because I have that kind of experience. And when you are able to layer in some multiple concepts, you get something of your own out of it. And that's really the physical process of what I go through to create the art. So this is another work in progress, and this is a combination of pencil and charcoal. And this is a better idea to visualize where it's going to be at the end of its life, because you can see very faintly, again, the mapping, the very simple pencil line that's indicative of where you're going to start to create shape. So a black horse is challenging because a lot of the lights are still darks, and a lot of the darks are darker than you can imagine. So this part I've at least been working on 2 months to get the musculature in a horse. I used to ride in a drill team, so I know about horses. And it makes it easier if you've ever been around or kept horses to know where, just like dancing, where are those muscles? What are they working when they're working it? How can you see that physiology and that anatomy? So this is kind of, you can start to see how the patent leather is starting to come alive with the very dark tones interspersed with some mid-tones and some lighter ones. This whole silk section for the horse's head, and for her, this is a female rider in Australia, this will all be in watercolor. So that's will be the only color in the picture, will be her and the horse in those silks. And again, this is on watercolor paper because I use the medium both for my pencil. Even if I wasn't adding water to it, I would always use watercolor paper because I like the texture. And this is what they call knot paper, meaning it's a medium texture. It's not rough and it's not smooth. And so it's in between, and it works for me for a lot of different mediums. And so the next thing that'll get added when the horse is done will be to do the watercolor and then go back and fill in the darks around that, etc. So the artwork for me is done in 2 places: in my home studio, which is a building outside of my house so that it's kind of quieter and it's just got me and my art materials. It's also on a garden, so it's really pleasant and beautiful to look at. It has lots of light. And so I'll use that as my one of 2 places that I create. The other one is here at the Atelier off Bay, where I have great lighting again. But when you are working on a really large piece, you have to be able to have work in both easels, because you've got to have work when you're here and you have to have work when you're not here. So most of us here take a shift and also work here any day we feel like it. And others have work that needs to get done that is messier. When you're mounting watercolor paper, which is what I work on, to a board, which is sometimes made out of aluminum composite material for stability, or it's put on a foam core, which is not your typical art school foam core. That is involved pressure and gluing and overnight and cleaning up and making it ready to use. And that's not something that I'm going to use in my pretty little salon here. So there's work that gets done in both of those places for the most part. So the way that I accomplish it in terms of timing is dependent on how many commissions I have and how many things people may have asked me for. And a 16 by 20, which is about the size of these dancers over here that you'll see, is about 2 months worth of work for a pencil commission, because that includes mounting it and preparing it and framing it, and I do all of that myself. If it's a larger piece, like something that's here on the easel that's 44 by 22, that's going to take me probably 3 to 4 months to get that ready. Plus, the more that gets layered into the process, like there's gold leaf that I'll use as an accent along with the graphite, that has to be done at a certain stage so that you're not writing over it, and you are putting it in there in a layering process. Same thing with watercolor. I'll often use watercolor as part of a pop in a graphite or a charcoal piece, and that has to get put in later, past the messiest part. So that's kind of, I think, the information. Well, anyway, anywhere between 2 months to 4 months if it's a really large piece. And I've done a piece that's like 55 by 56. I just went to Art Fields this past year, which is in Lake City, South Carolina, where I was accepted into that competition. And that took me over a year, mostly because I was working, I was traveling. You know, when you're retired and this is your only job, then you can do it a little more, you know, expediently. But nonetheless, it's not like a lot of artists that are able to do oil painting faster. So this is a little more detailed and it takes longer. This piece is done by Francesco Mochi. So he's a sculptor in Rome. This is at the Duomo in Orvieto, and the full scale sculpture is of the Annunciation, which is where the Archangel Gabriel, who this is pointing upward to Christ, and he's talking to Mary about the fact that she's been chosen to carry the Christ child. So I loved this particular image and zoomed in mostly for me on his face because of how powerful that whole sculpture is. I do want to do an entire full-length one, but that's going to take a 5-foot drawing. This is charcoal. And it's a newer process for me because it's charcoal on canvas. And one of the things that is evolved about my work is none of it is behind glass, because it's important for me that people can see without a reflection and not really have any of that. So everything is sealed and varnished so that it doesn't ever need pencil or graphite or charcoal to be behind glass. So this is a work in progress, nearly complete. This is Moses, and just loved the imagery of the face and created the space to the side of his face so you can tell that he's looking to the future because of that particular, he wasn't able to cross over into the new land, right? And so I felt like that was a great way to capture his look at that time, and that's pencil. So the difference between pencil and charcoal is definitely always a darker medium, and it's almost a more expressive medium in some ways, where pencil and graphite enables you to get great detail and also a lot of expressiveness in all of the layers. You know, the thing that I think is supportive here for me is I'm not using the beautiful landscape because I'm not a landscape painter, but what I have had inspire me are the people. I've never really lived in the South and came from the North, and people are friendlier here, and people have more patience, and they're more graceful, and they're just very down to earth and transparent. So I've been inspired by the people, and I've taught a lot. And one of the first people who ever approached me to teach is Ollie, the OSHA Lifelong Learning at USCB. And I taught there from almost the first time my feet hit the ground here. And they didn't have an art program, and they wanted one. And it was about time for them because COVID at that point had sort of taken a back seat before it resurged again in 2019. And so I had all these in-person classes, and I would coordinate for them and bring other artists to teach, you know, people who were jewelers and people who did other kinds of work. It's like, will you come and teach? Because people now wanted to not sit in a room and watch a 2-hour film about my trip to Russia. So they really did want to do hands-on work. And that was a change for Ollie. So In teaching, I just experienced the friendliness and the kindness that I think is specific to this area, besides the beautiful sunsets. So whatever pictures I've taken, and I do some photography, and it's out in the atelier here, it's really local art, and it's local. It's local. It's my house, it's my home. It's the pond, in our neighborhood. So those pictures are, all I do is capture that. I don't paint those. So over here, what we have is a work in progress. In particular, this is a commission in progress. So this is one of the types of art that I do. If somebody wants something in particular that's important to them, then we work together to make sure that the reference and the end result is what they had hoped for. So there's a little bit of give and take when you're talking about that. So these are actually friends of mine, not these people, but the people who commissioned it, in that they had a very meaningful trip one year to Penang, where there is a lantern festival. And the lantern festival is where people gather and write on their prayers and wishes for their family, their health, and all that. And they're usually 4 foot tall, and they send them up to the sky. It's a huge, massive lantern festival in that country. And it was very meaningful for these people. So they felt like they wanted something that was reverential, something that they could use to remember that in that whole time that they had. And so it had to be Asian. It had to be a lot of things for them. And what I found is this man and woman that are Asian, that are really, it'll be a nightscape. So the nightscape at the end will have a moon up here, and it'll have a mountain in the background, and they are called Dream Chasers. So this is the name of the piece, because it's reminiscent of the fact that they are chasing the dreams of people who have sent those wishes up to make sure they get to fruition for the folks that wished it. So what I'll really start out doing in pencil is everything starts with a really light pencil, and 2H is probably the lightest that I ever go. And that's why it's hard to photograph. I never touch my art, and I don't wear gloves. So it's important that whenever I'm working on something, that I'm working with some paper. This is really just a beginning. And you have to lay down what I call tone. So a light tone in a hard pencil is always establishing what I consider the mapping. Where is the angles? What is the fabric doing? Where is the light and where is the dark? So that when you go from a very rough individual line drawing, and before you start dealing with light and dark, you have to create some form. And the form cannot be created without laying down tone, because from the middle tone, you're going to add darks and you're going to add lights. And so this is just the very beginning of every drawing I start with, is you have to cover kind of the shape that I'm drawing. Like these happen to be fabric tendrils that are streaming out from this man and woman's pretty ornamental costume. And in order to create shape, you really use a contour drawing. So if I was drawing a body, I'd be using my pencil to create shape by letting the pencil follow the line of the body or the line of the fabric. And then there is, you build up from there. So once I've done that, I would then start with another darker pencil, because one of the things that you'll see here, and I'll switch to a 2B pencil, which is darker. When you start to work on this, you want to make sure that you're also working all of the tones at the same time, because it helps you find the shape. And to find the shape, you've got to use your dark shadows. Where is that? Because then instead of making something lighter or darker next to it, you now know from the dark thing where you are, that this is going to be, you can judge that shade better, is basically the idea. And so finding your way through this, while it's very light initially, it helps you understand the shape. Where is the shape going? And I always, if it's a figure and it's looking, if it's a human figure as opposed to even a horse, I guess I always do the same way, is you start with the eyes. Because if you don't get the eyes right, and if you don't read that into the soul, then there's really no part in getting a beautiful piece of fabric, because that's really not what figurative drawing is all about. And that's why you see more in the face of these two figures than you do throughout all of their costume, because this is just all fabric. And then the background is just really not important right now. But what is important, again, is understanding where are those dark tones? You know, where does that fabric go ahead and show the arm underneath it? And you can see just by drawing a tiny little line, if it can zoom in that close, is that lets you know the shape of the fabric. And it doesn't take much to make sure that you understand where the distinction is between, oh, that's under an arm, and all of a sudden, whatever it's next to comes forward. And these halos and this gold jewelry will be done pretty soon, because I can't draw everything behind it without getting the gold leaf on. So once I've managed to get in a little more information, like I am with this fabric, and this area gets covered, I'll finish the gold leaf and then go back and start adding darks. This is watercolor paper, and it's 300-pound paper, which is probably one of the thickest ones that you can get. They are a couple that is going to put this in their place in France, and there was a lot of conversation when you're doing a commission. How is it going to ship? Is it shipping with a frame? Is it going to be roll-upable? And nothing this stiff can be rolled up without damage. So it will be framed completely and then be shipped, or go with them to France when they're ready. And I think that's probably all I would do on this piece at the moment. There's a lot of galleries downtown here, and there's also Hilton Head. So I teach at the Art League at Hilton Head, and I was a member there for a while, but it isn't exactly around the bend. So for me, it was too far of a distance path to go every 2 months to change your art out at the Art League there. So that was another place I had my art up until about a year ago. So for now, the places that I do are really just the atelier, because this is my home base. And also I've exhibited at local colleges. At Ollie, they have shows and we organize things, because I'm a member of the Portrait Society of America, and we've put on shows where it involves the chapter, and we invite people to do it also, so that it'll go to local colleges, anywhere that anybody has the energy to help put those shows together. So those are where I would display, but not any other stationary, store that's like a gallery here. Okay. So the South Carolina Arts is a group that is state. It's a state art level organization, also 501(c)(3), and they have come here and have met with then Billy Kaiserling, and there was a forum at the CFA, the Center for the Arts here at USCB, and all of the community was invited to a lot of these different open forums, just talk about what does this community need? What does Beaufort need? And so that was invigorating, in that a lot of us came and we talked about the things that we thought would help this community. It would help the artists, and it would be a tourism attraction for people all around the world, artists particularly, go and take a workshop somewhere. So to take a workshop in a beautiful place where you can go out on the bluff and do plein air, draw outside, paint outside, those are the kind of programs that you can find, those opportunities through South Carolina Arts, and through really becoming involved in Eat, Stay, Play Beaufort. A lot of these places do advertise when some of these are going on. You can find grant access, you can find class access. So I just think if you got a person with a phone and an internet, Google this, because you will find places that you can stay in touch and take a class and take a workshop, including like the Coastal Arts Place across the street is a supply shop. They always have classes listed there, and they always have the materials that you need for the class. So just explore, step out. You don't have to go too far to find a place to try. And this is about, as I mentioned before, I was a dancer in New York City, and I've always enjoyed, even though that wasn't my career field, it was something that I loved the movement of. I loved the emotion of it. There are so many marvelous dancers, and the thing that's wonderful about photography is the photographer who captures these moments that you could never draw this, because they could never stand that long or be elevated like these guys from Ailey can do, is they are literally in full mid-leap, jumping up and being joined by 3 arms. And for me, being a Christian, I do really relate to the scripture that reminds me of what it is that I'm drawing. And for the triad here, 2 are better than 1, because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them fails, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. Furthermore, if 2 lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And if one can overpower him who is alone, 2 can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. And so that's from Ecclesiastes. And I just loved that scripture, and it spoke to me about this particular piece. I would say this about art, in my art in particular, is a lot of people don't necessarily know, in my experience, about what a giclée is. So there's original art, which is usually the expensive original, more expensive rather, because somebody wants the original. But if you are liking a piece of art, you need to know that there is a process of the original art being scanned or photographed professionally that is then able to be recreated on the same archival material with archival inks, and that is usually available at a much lower affordable cost. So those are things to consider when you're out shopping for art, is to understand that there's a thing called limited editions. It's signed. It will usually say on the piece 1 of 10, 1 of 5, number 2 of 5. So you'll find that anywhere, and just to be familiar with the fact that you don't always need to start your collection of art with the original. This piece is called Perseverance, and I just found in the life of this particular artist who worked for or was a member of Martha Graham, that she has herself had an incredibly difficult life. And in that, she was a gymnast once upon a time, and as a gymnast, she became injured. And in her injuries, she had to do rehab. And the rehab that she chose and got involved with was dance. So she started taking dance with Martha Graham and became a Martha Graham soloist. And so Charlotte Landau, who this is an image of, has always just evinced for me in her dancing and in her life this sense of perseverance. And this piece is Daughter of Shiloh. It's another, just magnificent full leap dancer. And for this, it says, "And watch and behold, if the daughters of Shiloh come out to take part in the dances, then you shall come out to the vineyards, and each of you shall catch his wife from the daughters of Shiloh and go to the land of Benjamin." This is from Judges. So there is a way in which Scripture has always informed to me some of the emotion that I see in these images when I go and select them to be drawing with. The thing that I, had mentioned earlier is you have got to take a class. You have got to get out there into a community. One of the things that I, gave you a list of and that I would encourage people to do is South Carolina Arts is very connected for the state, and they care about this community, and they have a wealth of information on their website. And it's the same thing for Ollie. It's $40 a year, and you can go and take any kind of a class that you want in person, or, they did drawing of trees. They do a lot of exhibition work. There's here, we teach here. I teach drawing. Other people teach pastel. There's watercolor. Immerse yourself in some place where you are in a small group that you feel like you can not be embarrassed because you don't know what you're doing, but there are places for like brand new beginners, people who think they have no confidence to do it. Try it. Find a class to take, because that will inspire you to feel like you can do it. And then as you grow, there's a lot of residencies. If you never knew where you wanted to go, or you wanted to take an opportunity and you just didn't think you were good enough, there's places all around the country, in fact, all around the world, where you can go and apply to be a resident there for a couple of weeks, learn from them. They often pay your room and board, and you're now in a community. And so it does seem like a long way from like, I can't do anything to living somewhere where you're learning it, but that's the exposure as an artist. It's really a good idea to take a beginner class in something. The Art League also has classes, but like I say, here, if you're in downtown Beaufort, there's 14 artists and a lot of them teach. And it's a small little place. You're learning right here. There's probably 4 to 6 people in a class. So you're not like in a room full of, 50 people hoping for the best.